Okay, welcome back. We're going to do the first century writing session. This time we're going to do a session on question and answers. So hopefully some of your questions I can answer. And then I would like for us to decide on a topic for next time, whether it's one of the Gospels or some of the writings of Paul or anything particular that we can probably go over. Questions? Remember, the first century writing should be the correct name for the New Testament. Okay. So let's start with that. First of all, it's not new; it's renewed. And it's not testament; it's covenant. What's called the New Testament is really not the New Testament. It's the renewed covenant. The translation, testament, is the least they should have used. And again, it's not new, it's renewed. The covenant is always the same forever and forever. It doesn't change. So what Yeshua did was renew the covenant. Okay? He renewed the covenant. Okay? Which in Hebrew would be the Brit Chadashah. Berit covenant. And even Hadashah is wrong because it's not new, it's renewed. Yeah. Questions. This is your time to ask questions. All those questions you've never had answered.
So, but basically the renewed, when you're saying renewed, it's like updated. If you look at the definition of renewed.
Never go by definitions you know today. Go by definitions from the past, from the context. Renewed is, for example, the covenant that Yahweh did with Israel in Mount Sinai. Yeshua is taking that same covenant, renewing it. Why? Because now it's a new generation, it's a new people. So he's renewing that covenant with us. Okay, it's not renewed that there's no changes to it.
So it's the covenant of Abraham.
It's the same covenant. Exactly. The covenant has phases, and the Lord has presented the phases to certain groups of people, but it's always building up. The first time he gave the covenant, the first covenant he made was with Adam and Eve. Covenant, same covenant, a grand covenant, the covenant of land, and the covenant that he made was Adam and Eve, then he made with Noah, then he made with David, then he made with Moses, then he made Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then eventually Yeshua is the same covenant, except it's bringing it in a renewed, doing it again, showing it again, presenting it again. There's really no changes except that the Lord has revealed it in phases depending on the generation that has been being taught, but you build upon it. So what was given to Adam and Eve, you put it with what's given to Noah, what was given to them too, then you put it to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then to David, and then to Yeshua. It's the same covenant, except it's been expanded upon.
And in all cases, it involved the land.
Always has involved the land. What the Lord did with Adam and Eve, right there, was called the Grand Land Covenant. Because it's a gift from the King. He started with Adam and Eve. What did he give them? The garden. They messed up. So then eventually it kept going down. Okay, you can't do it. Let's try Noah. Noah messed up. Then let's keep going. Moses, the people. Well, before Moses was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Excuse me, Pastor, would you say that there's a difference if you take, just piggybacking off of what Mickey said, is there a difference if you look at the word renewed in the Hebrew aspect of what that renewed, of that covenant meant compared to the Western mentality of what renew might mean? Like renew might mean, okay, you make something new again, you fix it, you amend it. But that's not what it meant. It said building upon. In the Hebrew is building upon. In the Western mind, it's you made
That's
a new.
That's why I'm saying you can't go by the Western definition.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. You would have to see it renewed in the Greek mentality renewed.
Right, but really it's restoration. It's restoring everything back to the way it was supposed to be from the beginning. And what was the thing? What was in the beginning? Yahweh living with his people, with his children. That's it. That's all his desire. You know, it's like you have your kids, and then when they hit 18, they say bye.
Prodigal son syndrome.
Yeah. And he's like, you know, God had an empty nest syndrome
And the
with Adam and
thing is that you
Eve.
always got to come back again, regardless.
So
Even on one foot.
So renew, really another word for renew would be restoration, restoring back to the original, to the basics. So
Can I have my kids back?
yes, well, you really want them back?
Not really.
Yes, I mean, why do we have that yearning for our children?
That's true.
Because Yahweh has the same yearning for us.
Wow.
It's the same thing.
We're crazy about them no matter what they do to us.
Oh,
We just
trust
love
me.
them and they drive us up the wall and we hate them for 5 minutes and we just love them.
Okay, questions about the first century writings?
Was it Aramaic?
Part of it was in Aramaic and part of it was in Hebrew, mostly Hebrew than Aramaic. Remember that during this time, the Greeks were very prominent. They went from, by the time Yeshua shows up, Israel had been under a great influence of the Greeks to the point that the Jews were Hellenized, what's called Hellenized, which meant that they were assimilated into the Greek culture to the point that a lot of them, to be accepted by their peers, their Greek peers, they reversed their circumcision, because to the Greeks, a circumcised person was an offense. Hello, where have we heard that before? Was an offense, and it was a mutilation of the body. So for them to be accepted by their peers, they did what's called a reversal of their circumcision.
How do they do that?
Oh, there's a way surgically. It's called long word. I don't know.
Where do they get it
It's
from?
from the foreskin.
So I don't know
We're
the
not
procedure
asking.
or the technique, but they do it. So they did that. And remember that during this time, the Olympics, the athletes did all their competition naked, and so it was shameful for the Greeks to see a circumcised man. So if they wanted to be part of the group, if they wanted to be part of the peers, to be accepted, they did a reverse of their circumcision. Okay? So anyway, so they were Hellenized, and once they went from the Greeks, when Yeshua shows up, they're under Roman control, but there was still a lot of Greek influence. A lot of Greek influence. And with the Romans, there was a social caste system. That means they were socially divided. There was the poor, there was a group called non-citizens, and within those non-citizens were doctors. I would have been a non-citizen. I would have had no privileges. And then afterwards, those that were called citizens were people that had money, that had influence in politics, that had influence in government. They were socially elites, people that went to school, to academias and stuff like that.
Yes.
Like Paul, right?
Like us.
Paul has a Roman citizenship.
Yeah, Paul was a citizen. Why? Paul studied. He was a Pharisee.
But if you're a doctor, you
Luke
have
was a
to
doctor.
study.
Yes, but you were considered a non-citizen.
Luke was considered non-citizen because he was a physician.
Yeah.
Luke.
So therefore, in the Roman caste system of that time, when Yeshua was walking upon this earth, they had social divisions. And so a lot of the things that go on, if you don't know that in the culture, you're not going to understand what's going on. And when Paul talks about now there's no slaves and there's no free and there's no man and there's no the caste system. So why was the message of Yeshua so revolutionary? Because he was taking all the politics, he was taking all the caste social system, he was making everybody equal. Same opportunity. You have a place in the house of my Father. You are worthy. You are someone. You belong. You have purpose. You have function. I am giving you life eternal. The Father has adopted you. He's made you into his family. You're part of the kingship. So when people heard that stuff, hello, They ran to Yeshua, and what was going on? The Pharisees and the Sadducees and all these guys that used to have control of the people, now they're losing control. They're going after this carpenter. Who's this guy who didn't study? He didn't go to yeshiva. He wasn't a relative of the Pharisees. Who's this dude? Carpenter? Hello?
They knew who he was.
Hmm?
They knew who he was.
No,
Not at the time.
not the religious people, not the religious leaders.
You think so?
And those, no, if had they known, they wouldn't have killed them. Now, some of them believed in Yeshua, but they have to do it secretly, because if not, they would have been excommunicated from the temple. And there was a lot of politics going on, the same as now. Nothing changes people. People are people. Nothing changes. So those things you need to know when you're reading Paul, because if not, you're going to misunderstand Paul. And when he talks about law,
Yeah,
you have to make a distinction between, is he talking about Torah or is he talking about the law of the land? Remember, he went to different places. There were laws for Rome. There were laws for Corinth. There were laws for Ephesus. There were laws for Galatia. There were laws for the same way that Florida has its own state laws, different from Iowa. Well, it happened in those other places when Paul was writing. So when he writes to the Romans, he's writing to the Romans. He's not writing to the Puerto Ricans. He's not writing to the Floridians. He's not writing to the people in Corinth or anybody else. He's writing to the Romans. Why? Because there's specific cultural things going on in Rome that's not going on anywhere else. But if you take that out of context and out of place, you're going to come up with saying, women cannot teach.
That's right.
That was not what he was saying. You take that out of context, you're calling God a liar, because there's nowhere in the Hebrew scriptures in the Old Testament that says women cannot teach the word of God. Nowhere. If you find it, I'll give you my car.
Ooh.
I gotta get that. I gotta look at it. Give me library, because I gotta
Section that
You're not going to find it, because one of the leaders, prominent leaders of Israel was Deborah. A woman. She was a judge. She was a leader. She was a consultant. She was a warrior. Nowhere you're going to find in the Hebrew scriptures that women were not allowed to speak the word of God. As a matter of fact, when is it Elijah, one of them, I always confuse them. The lady that couldn't have a child, and then she had a child, and he died, and he breathed over her. Anyway, that lady that whatever her name is, she was a prominent woman. If you look into the culture and really look into her background, she is a woman of prominence. She was wealthy. She had a social status.
Can you tell me the New Testament where people take that to say that women can't be heads of churches and things?
Excuse me?
Where is it in the New Testament that people use to back up their teaching that women can't lead?
Because they take it out of context. A place where I can't remember now, where Paul says women are not allowed to speak or teach in the synagogues. And so they take that out of context, and they say that means that women nowhere on this planet Earth can teach or speak in churches or in congregations or things like that. Just one verse. Again, anybody that comes to you with a doctrine based on one verse, run away from them. Run away from them, because when the Lord is going to teach you something, you'll find it everywhere. Everywhere. Because there always has to be witnesses. Witnesses. The word is its own witness, and the word will explain itself. But when you take it out of context, you're going to find things that sound like they're not incongruent. They don't line up. If you take it out of context, a lot of stuff is not going to line up. Like I said, the letter written to the Ephesians is the letter written to just the Ephesians. Letter written to Romans is just to the Romans. Why? Because there's specific cultures and customs and traditions that you don't find in any other place. Yes.
So we cannot get out of those letters anything?
You can get, because there's certain basic teachings that you can get. But things that when Paul says you don't do this or you don't do that, or you have to read the whole letter. You just can't take Romans and read one chapter and think you know it all. When you sit down to read Romans, you read the whole letter of Romans in one sitting. If not, you're losing the context.
It's in 1 Timothy 2:11 and 12.
1 Timothy 2. Let's go to 1 Timothy.
He's answering specific questions on those.
The problem is the questions. We don't know the
We don't know the
questions.
questions.
Okay.
So when you apply things that were given to a specific people during a specific time, during a specific culture, during a specific with specific traditions and customs, and put it to for everybody, that's why you have over 40,000 denominations. How can you get 40,000 denominations based on one book? Tell me.
And then call it truth.
And then call it truth. Why? Because it's 40,000 interpretations of one same thing. And that is due because they just look at it through the Western mindset in one box, and they don't go out of that box.
And they throw away the Torah.
And they throw away the Torah. What are they doing? They're throwing away the foundation of the building. How are you going to sustain a building if you take away the foundation? Yeshua talked about that. When you build something, where are you going to build it? On the rock or on the sand? And I'm not saying that things were done, on purpose, that somebody woke up and said, I'm going to mess with God and all his people. But because they don't go back, why? Because of the anti-Semitic attitude, they don't go back to the culture, they don't go back to the Middle Eastern traditions and customs based on the Bible, and so they come up with all this weird stuff, which one of them was what I said that women can't teach. What was that again, Mickey?
1 Timothy
Chapter 2, verse
2,
11.
11 and 12.
1 Timothy chapter 2,
11 and 12.
verse 11, 12. First of all, the book of 1 Timothy, to who is it addressed? To Timothy, a specific individual.
This is like commentary on the Torah kind of.
It's like common sense.
It says, now again, for us to understand this, we would have to read the whole letter to Timothy. If we just take this out of context, which is I'm going to do so you can see what's happening, verse 11. Let a woman learn in peace, fully submitted. Right there, just that word submitted all hell breaks loose.
Oh yeah.
Of course.
Why? Because in our culture, you're going to tell me I'm going to be submitted to a man?
That's right.
Yeah.
Why? What's our understanding of submitted?
Un placemat.
Walked all over.
A placemat.
Placemat? You walk all over. You're home, you clean, you this, you do, you that, you have the kids, you're a slave. I have you when I want you, and that's it.
No.
You have no say in that.
Huh.
Right? That's the word
Right.
submission.
Right.
That's our culture, that's our
Make me mad,
understanding.
And that's
Okay.
the way it is in a lot of cultures. In fact,
But that's not what God
No.
in some
Why?
cultures.
Because if you go way back to the beginning, when God created Adam and Eve, he didn't take her from his feet, he didn't take her from
the
his
side
head.
to be equal. Yes.
To be equal. A husband and wife have the same equal privileges, rights
Yes.
in a house together. Why? Because it's the two becoming one. Now, the final word should be not hers, but his.
Yes.
And whatever the husband decides, whatever he decides, that decision, he's responsible for all his household before the Lord. Because what was the purpose of the husband? To be like a priest, a representation of Yeshua, of Yahweh in the house, to protect, to provide,
Missionary.
and to deal with the spiritual aspect of all. He's responsible for, let's call it, salvation of his whole family.
Pretty much
To
he
bring
ushers
them
into
to
the
bring them
presence.
to Yahweh, to keep the covenant, continue the covenant, and be faithful to Yahweh. And I assure you, when a man is faithful to Yeshua, his wife is right at with him.
Smiling.
Is right with him.
Read 11 again.
Let a woman learn in peace, fully submitted.
Mine has it a little different. It
Okay,
says,
that's-
let a woman receive training in a quiet demeanor with complete respect for order.
Now we in training. Look at that. Now I'm a dog.
So again, another different translation. What translation is that?
NIV.
This was
So that's another thing, different translations.
I have one.
My opinion is what does yours say?
Mine says, verse 11 says, women should learn in silence and all humility.
I got another one.
gotta see this. We
Tell
gotta
me,
see
Jonathan,
this.
what does yours say?
Let the woman learn in silence with all subjection.
What was
All
that?
subjection.
Let women learn in silence. Do you think this group can learn in silence? Let all women learn in silence with subjection. Again, what do you understand about subjection?
Choke, yes.
Again, because people they threw away the Torah. They don't have any background to go back to. Read Genesis. When God created heaven, Adam and Eve, the functions, the roles, the purposes, together.
Why might he say this to Timothy?
Again, you have to read the whole letter. Why? Because in that time, let's read all chapter 2 to see what it says. First of all, then I counsel that petitions, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for all human beings, including kings and all in positions of prominence, so that we may lead quiet and peaceful lives, being godly and upright in everything. This is what God, our deliverer, regards as good. This what meets his approval. He wants all humanity to be delivered and come to full knowledge of the truth. For God is one, and there is but one mediator between God and humanity, Yeshua the Messiah, himself human, who gave himself as a ransom on behalf of all, thus providing testimony to God's purpose at just the right time. This is why I myself was appointed a proclaimer, even an emissary. I am telling the truth, not lying, a trustworthy and truthful teacher of the Gentiles. Therefore, it is my wish that when the men pray, no matter where, they should lift up hands that are holy. They should not become angry or get into arguments. Likewise, the women, they should not become angry or get into arguments. Likewise, the women, when they pray, should be dressed modestly and sensibly in respectable attire, not with elaborate hairstyles and gold jewelry or pearls. You know why he's saying that? You know why he's saying it's not that you cannot adorn yourself. It's not that you can be pretty.
You can't be the reason.
Why he's saying that? Because of the culture. Women that did that were loose women. They were looking for a hubby-bubby. Yeah, yeah. And then there's other places where he goes and says the opposite. And he says, insensibly in a respectable attire, not with elaborate hairstyles and gold jewelry or pearls or expensive clothes. Rather, they should adorn themselves with what is appropriate for women who claim to be worshiping God, namely good deeds. Let a woman learn in peace, fully submitted, but I do not permit a woman to teach a man or exercise authority over him. Now, this is Paul's opinion. Doesn't say that anywhere in the Bible. This is his opinion. Why? Because a lot of these other places where he went to, when he went into the synagogue, it looked like a zoo. And another thing was, usually it was the men who went to the synagogue to learn, and if the wife was there, sometimes, again, they're hearing all these news they never had before. And so they're like, what is he saying? What does he mean? Tell me. Remember that they would separate the men from the women. So if my husband is over there and he's and somebody's teaching something about eternal life and that I'm made equal in the eyes of God and all this stuff, and I'm like, honey, what does that mean? What does that? So you have a whole bunch of women trying to ask their husband what's going on, and they're back and forth, and it's in the synagogue there had to be order. So that's why he's saying it's not that he's against it, because there were a lot of homes that women had opened as congregations for the people to come and learn and be able to together fellowship and teach. And they were women that were leading the homes, the congregations. Okay, so let's continue reading. And he says, but I do not permit a woman to teach a man or exercise authority over him. Rather, she is to remain at peace. For Adam was formed first, then Hava. Hava is really Eve's name. It was translated Eve, but it's Hava, which means life. Also, it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman who, being deceived, became involved in the transgression. Nevertheless, the woman will be delivered through childbearing, provided that she continues trusting, loving, and living a holy life with modesty. Right there where it says the woman will be delivered through childbearing, now you're thinking, wow, she's not safe, she doesn't have children? Again, you can't take things out of context. You have to read the whole letter. And you first, not only that, before you sit down and read Timothy, first you have to know where Timothy is living.
His father and grandmother.
Where? Where was he living? In Rome?
I don't know.
In Ephesus? In Galatia? In Corinth?
Greece.
Thessalonians?
In Thessalonica, I think he was living. So before you start reading Timothy, the 2 letters of Timothy, remember Timothy was chosen to be a pastor. He's a young man. So Paul is trying to instruct him on how to be a good pastor. And so before you start reading that, you have to know first, where does Timothy live?
Looks like Ephesus.
If it's in Ephesus, you have to go and search the culture of Ephesus during that time. How did the women dress? How did the women live? What was going on in the synagogues? What was the social status of the people? What was their culture? What was their customs? What was their traditions? Because then when you start reading, you'll put your experience, you put your culture, your understanding into what he's saying. And right now, right here, we have like 4 or 5 different translations, and all of them, which one is the right one? And the only way you can know that is if you go to the context of what's being written to Timothy and why it's being written.
I mean,
Yeah,
just in that passage, address so many different things, just from everything from.
But it had to do because if you go to Ephesus, I think
He was in Ephesus.
he was in Ephesus. When Paul went to Ephesus, what was one of the things that he noticed that really bothered him?
They worship Diana.
They worshiped Diana. Diana was their patron god. So they have all this. You have to know what was the worship of Diana. Fertility was one, and Diana is another name for Ashtera, for what's called today Easter. So remember that there was a lot of temple prostitution going on. There was a lot of fertility fornication going on. So when you start reading Timothy, you need to know where is he living, so he knows how to deal with the background of the culture of the people.
And I think too, reading those books, you get the background of what's going on in that time.
Let me see what it says here about Timothy 2. Yes, you have a question. You have a question.
Do you think any of it might have something to do with women usurping authority, maybe?
Who or what?
You know, like if men wouldn't take the position that they have to take, the woman would usurp authority? Because some women want to be the men of the house.
You're bringing in the culture of today to this. It has nothing to do with that.
What was, okay. I
So,
don't know if then it was because women
You're bringing in your Puerto Rican background.
I think it was the whole
this Bible-
prostitution.
in this Bible, it says that seductive hairstyles was braided hair.
It has
Yeah,
to do with
seductive.
Rome, like if you were
Braided
married, you
hair.
were there.
So I guess
Again,
in that culture, they
In that
braided their
culture,
hair.
that was a sign. If you were after, you wanted to get hitched or somebody with somebody,
You braid your hair.
you braided your hair. You didn't cover it.
Braided.
And sometimes they would. twist
Again, you
their
have
hair
to
a
see
certain
what they
way.
call braid.
Oh,
So you have to get your book of manners and customs and see the hairdos.
interesting.
It's
And you
true.
go in, because in some places, Paul says the men are not to cover their heads. Is that true? When you go into the temple, do men cover their heads?
Yes.
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 Temple protocol requires a man. The Kohanim had
So
some.
why he was saying don't cover?
Because it's the culture. The
Like
people that were not in the temple,
the Torah.
outside the
Yeah,
temple,
he's talking outside the temple.
they went to their pagan temples with their heads uncovered.
He's talking about, yeah.
So you have to know the context. Because if you say that, then you're going to say Paul is crazy, because in the temple, men have to have their heads covered. And here he's saying, don't cover your hair. You have to go to where he's writing, to whom he's writing, what's going on in the culture, in that background. Let's see what this commentary says on verse 11 of 1 Timothy 2. It says, the proper way for any novice to learn was submissively and quietly. A closely related Greek term appears also in 2:2 for all believers. Although exceptions were made for elite women, and some intellectuals praise the ability of women or particular women to learn, most men considered intellectual activity a predominantly male exercise. Women were less likely to be literate than men, sometimes estimated at 10%, as often as men of the same social class were trained in philosophy far less often than men. Were trained in rhetoric almost never, and more importantly here in Judaism, were far less likely to be educated in the Torah. Boys were raised to recite the Torah, girls were not, although they could listen in synagogues and remember what they heard at home. Why? Because it was the men's responsibility to learn the Torah, and as the head of the house, come home and teach his wife and his children and his grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren.
So that's almost like Yentl,
Yes,
just like
I love that movie.
I love that movie. I have.
It says, given the bias against instructing women in the law and Torah, it is Paul's advocacy of their learning the Torah, not this recognition that they started as novices and so had to learn quietly that was more countercultural. Women did occasionally attend rabbinic lectures, but the vast majority of rabbis would never accept them as disciples. And Hellenistically oriented Jews like Josephus and Philo were even more biased against them than the rabbis were. There's evidence for a few women filling higher roles in some diaspora synagogues in local cultures where women had higher social positions. But the same evidence shows that even there, prominent women in synagogues were the rare exception rather than the rule. So it's not that they didn't do it. There were just not that many. And most of the women that led in synagogues were educated. And not all women were educated. Why? Social class systems. But what do? They take that context. And right now, there's a whole bunch of... I'm sorry. There's a whole bunch of Baptists out there that won't even talk to me because I am a woman pastor. Hello?
Oh, no.
Yes. Or you telling me the other not too long ago I told somebody that I was a pastor, and you should have seen the face on that guy. You should have seen the face on that guy. Another day someone walked in here, and when he realized that I was the leader of this congregation, he came with his mom and he said, "This is not the place for me. This is not the place for me. Come on, Mom, let's leave. This is not the place for me." I think you were here.
No, I wasn't.
Sure, it sounds like a chauvinistic type.
Again, that's a cultural term of ours, not theirs. Again, you cannot take out of context without knowing the culture, the situation, to who he's writing. First of all, there's when you read Paul's writings, there are no questions. He knows the question, but we don't. How dare we apply a letter that was written to the Romans to the lives of every Christian on this earth? That doesn't mean there's good information, because Paul talks about Yeshua and the work of Yeshua and all. But then if he's giving specific things that sound kind of not right, look at the background of the culture, of the customs of the. But if you know Torah, if you know your Torah, remember that Paul was a Pharisee. A Pharisee. He knew the Torah upside down, backwards, inwards, in Greek, in Hebrew, in Aramaic. And you think he's going to speak against the Torah? But you hear some people saying, "Oh, Paul is crazy, coco, loco, whatever." Because here he talks about the Torah, saying it's good, and here he says against the Torah. No. Because they translated Torah and law, the law of the land, the law of the state, the same as the Torah of Yahweh. They use the same words, so that's why it's hard to distinguish what's he talking about unless you read the whole letter. Whenever you sit down to read Paul, if you're going to read Romans, you better start it and finish it the same day, the same time. Yes, sir.
Then why would the way the Bible is written, why would it, with all this confusion all throughout the years, down throughout the history, why would God allow it to be written in certain ways and then put together in a book like this, and then it's misunderstood, and then all this bad.
People had the instruction, but they did away with the instruction. It's not God's fault. He allows it. Why? Because of our own stupidity. He allows us to walk in our own stupidity. If you are truly a follower of Yahweh, you go to His whole word from beginning to end. You don't start at the end of the book. When you buy a book, do you start in the middle? When someone comes to know Yeshua as Messiah, as their Lord and Savior, what is the first thing they tell you to read?
John.
John! John!
John
The last of the gospel. And
The
John
book of
said in
John.
the beginning there was a word.
Because God is smarter than we are, and He knew they're not reading Torah. They're going to throw Torah away, so let me do something. They're going to read John? Okay, let's go to John. Let's go to John.
In the beginning.
Gospel.
The Gospel of John. And how does John start? In the beginning. Where do you get that from? From Genesis. So what is he telling you? Hint,
Back to
hint,
the
wink,
beginning.
wink. Go back.
Exactly.
Before you
Go
read
back.
any more, go
Exactly.
to
Back to
the
the
Torah.
beginning.
But no. Oh, the Torah has been done away with. So basically, they're asking you to build a building with no foundation.
Yep.
On
And
quicksand.
Go ahead and teach that to
teacher
your children
Huh?
at the end of your descendants.
And there was a teacher that was teaching me things. I'm like, okay, I was having Bible studies with her, and she told me stop reading the Old Testament. Oh, I got angry, but I did
Well,
not.
good for you.
I did not stop reading the Old Testament and the New Testament. But then she was saying everything she had to go by other teachers what they explained, and it was all referring back to Jesus. And I'm like, I was reading in there like some of these parts that she's reading saying about Jesus are not in there. The Yeshua is not. It doesn't mean that.
But the only way to recognize that what she was telling you was a lie and it was bogus is if you know the word of the Lord, all of it.
Yes,
The only-
you had already been exposed to the Torah. That's how
Yeah.
it's written.
Yeah. So that's yes. ma'am.
In John, it has a reference, the very first reference down at the bottom, Genesis 1:1.
Yes.
It's got the go right back to the beginning.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And they
Yeah.
don't read the book of Revelation because they don't understand everything is from the Old Testament in Revelation. There's nothing from the New Testament in Revelation. All Nicolaitans, there's Jezebel, Balaam, Moses,
Yeah.
everything.
And so if you listen to all these end time prophecies out there, especially about the book of Revelation, they're what they're saying is absolutely nuts, crazy. It doesn't align with the word. You have
What
to
was
go to the beginning and read all of it in context.
What was the famous thing that Jesus said? He says, "Not even I even know
Yeah,
the time.
it's the Father.
And all they're waiting for
Only the Father
resurrection.
knows."
For-
That's just
what do you call that? Rapture.
Yeah, I mean, even the concept of rapture is completely out of context. Completely, absolutely, and it's all based on Greek understanding.
I've read those verses in the Bible in those books where it was talking about rapture and it just made no sense. And it wasn't even talking about that. And then I was like, going away to being caught up going to the land of Israel. How is it meaning that? It's like, it made no sense.
That's what I'm saying. If they don't go back to the context and to the understanding from the beginning, they come up with all these weird fables and stuff, and people believe it. Oh, and they'll preach it to the point they're blue in the face, and they'll say, no. There's going to be a lot of surprised people. Same thing with the Sabbath. Sabbath is not Sunday. First of all, when the Lord created the world and started the week, He didn't give, it was very simple. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and Shabbat. It's the only day that has a name. Only day that was blessed, that was separated, that was made holy. And then we come and add names of gods. Monday is the name of a god. Tuesday is the name of God.
What? So
Yeah.
every time
Yeah.
we speak,
Yes,
we're saying,
yes.
we're naming.
Monday is from the moon. Tuesday is Mars. Wednesday is
Sunday is the sun god.
sun god.
Thursday for Thor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thursday is Thor. God Thor.
Saturn.
For Saturn.
Yeah.
And Sabbath.
All that comes from
Saturday.
Roman.
Every line.
All that comes from Roman philosophy, Greek philosophy, myth.
That's why there's a Hebrew calendar.
And there's
And you can go
And
exactly.
month name also, month names also.
And the month also, the names of the month are based on Greek gods. Yes.
But isn't Sabbath, the word Sabbath, is Saturday in every language? Sabato, like Italian.
They're similar.
Greek.
They're
It all
similar.
sounds more to a Saturday. If you say it in Italian,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
sounds Saturday. If you say it in Russian, it sounds Saturday.
Yeah, it's similar.
Whatever you say,
Because it's a transliteration of the word Shabbat. Remember, because no other language has a letter that has the SH sound. So instead of saying Shabbat, they say Sabbath or Sabbat or Sábado.
Or Salto
Okay.
or something.
So then how do you know it's Saturday, the Sabbath?
Because that's the sixth.
If in the book of Genesis it says day 1, day 2, all the way to day 7.
Then day one, day two, day
Then
three.
where does
when
it
they
say
name the
Saturday
days.
is the day for the Sabbath?
Because Saturday, it's like she was saying,
Start
Saturday
Friday night.
Yeah, but
Day one.
is
when you
Shabbat.
say, how do we know that day one is actually Sunday?
Yeah, how do you know
Sunday?
which day was each day? It said day 1, day 2. It didn't put a name out there.
Didn't say
Because
day
they
one.
assigned it to day one and day two.
Okay.
Day one, they decided in our culture, in our language, is Monday. But when you look up what Monday means, I think it comes from the moon god.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday is Mars. Wednesday is, I don't know. Thursday is Thor. Friday, I can't remember. And then Saturday,
Friday's Frida, the goddess Frida.
Frida. Wednesday, I can't remember. So what happens? No one else has a letter that represents the SH sound. All we have is the S. So instead of saying Shabbat, we say Sábado. In Spanish, Sábado.
Mm-hmm.
And you know a whole bunch of language. What else is
In
there?
Italian is Sabato.
In Italian,
Yes,
Sabato.
Asha, what about Saturday in Hindi?
Shanivar.
But my question even further is like before the calendar was set up, before the languages were set up with the names of the days, how did you know which one was the Sabbath?
Pastor,
Because it's counting it.
I
Because
believe what
when
he's
you
trying
started
to
with
ask
the
you.
moon,
Because
right,
even
they used the
counting
No,
it,
what he's
it's
trying to
like
ask-
the calendar was made later on.
Actually, the
past
first day
creation.
was named after the sun god, which is Sunday. That was
Yeah.
the first
I
day.
think-
No,
That's the
even
first thing.
before that,
She's
it
saying
that's
wasn't named after the sun god. It was just day 1.
Pastor,
But that's the
How
way
is
they
day
did it.
one?
But as they went into different nations, they adopted the calendars of those different nations and the names. They knew it was the seventh day because that's
I
They
think
always
his
celebrated on the
question
same
is,
day.
why do you know that day 3 is Wednesday and Wednesday is not day 1 or day 2? How do you know? That's what he wants to know.
doesn't
What-
matter.
how do
You,
you
you
know?
could
And some people are so strict they say the Sabbath is Saturday, or it's Sunday, or any day of the week you want it to be. Like, then which day is it?
Didn't they count?
It's the seventh day. The seventh day is the seventh day if you go by the Bible, by the word, what God said. This has been assigned. As a matter of fact, if you want to make your own week, you can make your own week. Day 1 is Jonathan's day. Day 2 is Mommy's day. Day 3 is whoever's day. Doesn't matter. As long as you know that the seventh day is always going to be Shabbat.
Okay.
And again, remember that there's differences in the calendars. There's a lunar calendar. There's a sun solar calendar, and then there's calendars that have both in them.
It's very
So
simple,
how do you
Jonathan. When they
get
were
strict on
exiled.
saying it's on a Saturday then?
But that's not what he's saying. I know
Johnny,
what he's
Exactly.
trying
listen,
to
listen.
Because
He's
as
trying
time
to
went
say
on,
biblically.
then the calendars were set up, the days of the week were set up.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you know which day is the exact day as Sabbath?
The Hebrews have been celebrating on the same day since the beginning, okay? Since they were given the Torah. When they were exiled into the nation, into Babylon, let's say,
They
adopted
adopted.
the calendar of Babylon. And in the calendar of Babylon, then the seventh day would have been whatever name they gave it to Shabbat.
But that's not what he's
That's
saying.
not what
What
he's
he's
asking.
asking in the creation story, I believe this is what you're asking.
Yes.
It says day 1. How was it determined that day 1
Was Monday.
was
Monday.
or
Like,
Tuesday?
Before all that history,
Before all
That's
of
what he's
that,
saying. Exactly.
in the creation
how do
story,
you know for certain?
They assigned it
Moon,
based
lunar.
on the solar and lunar and
Yes.
planetarium and whatever
So it was the
system.
moon at
And
that
it's
time.
tradition after customs. Who knows? Yeshua comes back and tell you, really, it's all messed up.
The only thing that matters is Sabbath. Yeah.
It's tradition that has been passed down. As a matter of fact, if you read about even in the Gospels, when you read the Gospels, there's a difference between the times and days of Passover in the Gospel of John compared to the times and days of the Passover in the Gospel of Mark, for example. Why? Because in Jerusalem they went by the Hebrew in Jerusalem because the temple was there. The days started in the evenings. In Jerusalem, now we're talking about in Jerusalem where the temple is. But if you weren't in Jerusalem and you lived in the Galilee, the day started in the mornings. So when you read the gospel, sometimes you're going to see that the Passover times and days, they don't sound like they match. But it's because even within, just from Galilee to Jerusalem, there was a different way of calling the days day and evening. So to find an answer to your question, you have to sit down and look at all the background, all the context of how days and months and years came about. The history, you have to go back and look at all the history and all the culture and all the traditions and all the customs to get to where we at in our calendar. There's difference everywhere. If you go to China, they have one calendar. If you go to
and there's difference in days. It could be Monday in New York, but it'll be Tuesday in Italy.
I'm not basing it
It'll be
on
Thursday
all
in
the,
Africa.
the calendar days and everything like that. I'm just saying, like,
because
which
they
day
had
is
the written
Sabbath?
word of the Lord, and they had a timing when that was written. That's been
Did
passed
Adam
down.
carry it down?
Absolutely.
At the time
Absolutely.
of Noah,
Yes.
also God gave them the time
Yeah.
and day. He said, Nisan of the 14th day,
Yeah.
you do this.
Remember that in the beginning they were being directed and guided by God directly. He was telling them this is the time. And another thing is God is so smart that he said he put his feast around the agriculture of the people. So therefore, when it was summer and when, for example, when it was spring, even though if they didn't call it spring, they knew it was spring. Why? Because everything was
going up.
the sun was in some here and not there, and then all of a sudden everything was giving fruit, and so by what they were seeing. And another thing is we're very strict about 24-hour days. They didn't go by 24-hour days. So to understand your question, which I can see the logic, you have to do a whole research of time, of calendars and timing and cultures. Yes, you want an answer. But Yahweh in the beginning, like you said, he spoke directly to Noah and told him this is the time and this is going to happen and you're going to follow this. When it was with Abraham, the same thing. So they followed basically their agricultural calendar more than anything else. Based on the season of the latter rains and the early rains, and when did you sow and when did you reap, and what grew in what season and what didn't grow in what season.
That's why moon is every 14th day. They know this is 14th day finishes, it's going to be full, it's going to be new.
They relied a lot on the heavens, on the way the moon looked, the stars, the planets, the sun.
But you can't deny you can't depend on the weather here in Florida.
Even when you read I think it's Isaiah, Hezekiah. Remember Hezekiah was dying, and he prayed to the Lord not to.
And the prophet
and when the prophets told him, Hezekiah, put your house together in place because you're gonna die. And as soon as he turned around, Hezekiah said, "Oh my Lord, I don't want to die now." He started crying, praying to the Lord, "Please, please, 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 I don't want to die. I don't want to die." And the Lord added 15 years to his life.
10 degrees sun when
and so when Isaiah's leaving, he said, "Go back and tell Hezekiah that I have given him another 15 years of life." And then Hezekiah says, Isaiah asks him a question about the sun's shadow, the shadow of the sun. And he says, "Do you want it 10 degrees or less, 10 degrees more, 10 degrees, whatever, I don't know, can't explain it." But Hezekiah gave him an answer. And it used to be, if you look at how they measured shadows and timing during that time of Hezekiah. They used to have a wall, and this wall had certain lines, like degrees. I think every line represented 10 degrees.
Oh, I saw a movie, something.
Okay? Between every line there was 10 degrees. You know, degrees in terms of circumference or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
I should have listened to that geometry class. So as the sun went from east to west, it cast a shadow on this thing. So when the shadow kept rising and rising, they knew what time it was. Was it exact? Was it 3 p.m. and 5 seconds? Who cares? It was in the afternoon. It was around 3. And so as that shadow moved, they knew what time it was. And it wasn't a specific time, like right now it's 4:30 and 10 seconds.
Here.
They had an idea of evening, morning, noon, stuff like
So when
that.
someone asked them what time it was, even if it was 3:30, they would say it's 3 o'clock.
Or did it say it's in the afternoon? It's between. Yeah.
Afternoon. It's
So-
late afternoon, late afternoon.
So the thing is, when he tells Hezekiah, this is what's going to happen. If let's say the shadow was here, and he said it returned 10 degrees, that means that the shadow went down here. It changed from being up here, 10 degrees, to down here, which meant that the sun went back 10 degrees. That was their clock. A wall, seeing the shadow of the sun as it passed, and that wall had degrees, and
Kind of like the sun
Wow.
dial.
yeah, kind of like the sundial.
And some people argue, they say sun stood, not the earth stood. They say sun is moving around the earth, not the earth.
No,
moving
the earth
around.
moving around the sun.
Sun stood because it's moving and it's
Again, another thing is, once you know a little bit about cosmology, you understand the concept of, was it the earth moving or was it the sun moving?
I hear.
sitting beside you.
So, to answer your question, I don't know the answer, but if you want to know, that's a research project for you. You go and look up all the
Lifetime.
But it wasn't like exact timings. But the Lord gave them like the same thing with when Yeshua comes back. Do we know the hour and the day, the time exactly? No. Do we know the season?
Yes.
Yes.
The seasons, you know, a sponge fell
One
down.
last part of that question is then why are some people so strict it's this certain day of the week?
Because they're idiots. No one really knows. It's like right now, no one really knows if it is if Jubilee starts this year or we passed the Jubilee. Nobody knows. There's assumptions or speculations for everybody has a different opinion. You go to Israel and ask your question over there, you're going to have 5 people giving you 10 opinions. So the thing is, there's no exactness. But the Lord doesn't give us specific hours and seconds and minutes. He gives us the season. That's why he tells you, know the feasts, because the feasts are associated with seasons, with agriculture. If you understand that, you'll have an idea. So that means every time we have a tabernacles, you make sure you're celebrating tabernacles. And another thing, all this is related to Israel. We're 7 hours behind
Exactly.
Israel.
That's right.
It's 2 o'clock here. It's something.
So when we celebrate Shabbat, they're already finished celebrating Shabbat.
Mm-hmm.
And remember that Yeshua is not coming to Brandon, Florida when he comes back.
That's right.
He's going to Jerusalem. It's going to be
That's where
Jerusalem
I'm
time.
I will be
Yes.
there.
That's right.
So if you really want to know time and day, you better live in
Go
Israel.
home,
Well, didn't he say that the whole world, everybody will see him?
Oh, I assure you, everybody's going to know he's back.
Every knee, every tongue shall bow, and every eye shall see.
But that doesn't mean he's going to come here. But I assure you that what's going to be in the heavens is enough for everybody to know. Not only that, everybody's going to have their phone.
And some people are sleeping. For them, he comes like a thief. He already
Or
came,
night,
they didn't know.
or day. In
I
the southern part of this earth is what? Well, I don't know, whatever. Some places it's snowing, some places it's summer.
Yeah.
Some places it's night, some places it's day.
So you know it's
So
winter.
whatever, when all the whatever's gonna happen, the sky's gonna have you going to people.
Yeah.
In 2 seconds, the whole earth is gonna know that Yeshua's come back by their phones.
Oh.
And you know, hold on. Yesterday, I heard one preacher was telling, and the enemy, he wanna, as they see Yeshua, they wanna shoot him dead. The enemy, with his missiles and all
Good
that.
luck.
Yeah,
Let them
It's
try.
kind of like
They
putting
see
those
Wonder
graves
Woman.
before they
It's gonna go.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
Superhero.
yesterday I was listening one conference.
He's
If
like,
you read
he's like,
this 2016 prophecy conference, one
Please.
preacher was telling this.
It's gonna be like, the Matrix.
All I'm saying, people,
He said Antichrist office is in Brussels, and they're preparing for that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's how
Doing
stick to your
backflips.
sprouts.
It kind of reminds me of the fiddler on the roof. Remember the fiddler on the roof? He says, "Let's go ask the rabbi. Go ask the rabbi."
but again,
Oh my gosh.
if we really stick to the word, and again, it's important to look at different versions and see the translations, but you have to go back to the original words and see the translations, because a lot of the translations the people have input their own theology, and so therefore it's going to bring all these. All I'm saying is, don't be satisfied. As a matter of fact, don't even be satisfied with what I'm telling you. Verify everything I'm saying. Look it up.
Yeah.
I bring you my resources. I don't make this stuff up. I mean, you go to my house, you're going to see tons of books. You don't know how much I spend on books. Before it used to be on medical books. Now it's on books on the Torah and all the commentaries and all the background resources and temple resources.
By the way, that word for the circumcision reversal is epispasm.
That's what you get, a spasm, if you do it. I'm going to shut down because this is getting